the moonlight.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your number one fan.
Hey up and welcome back to another bonus episode of Rate Scary. I'm so glad to have you here. If you are new here, I have a podcast where every Monday we go through a film from a particular subgenre of horror, and at the moment we are covering off torture horror. But then laced in between those, I release an episode whenever we have a theatrical horror film release. And I'm a little bit behind, but I think this episode catches me up somewhat. And I'm going to be talking about Drop from 2025. So as always, if you do not want this film to be spoiled, if you haven't seen it yet, please save this episode and come back to it later after you have seen Drop, because I am going to be giving away major spoilers and I don't want to ruin it for you. But if we're in the clear now, let's get into the story. So Drop opens with a woman that we see crawling on the floor. She's got a man looming over her. She's clearly terrified, and then it cuts. And we then see the same woman giving a counselling session, and we understand her name to be Violet. Now, Violet is a widowed mother whose abusive husband, Blake, died by suicide, and she has now begun dating, and we arrive with her on the day that she is about to go on a date. And as she finishes the counselling session, we get a bit of a jump scare because a maintenance worker knocks on the window and asks to take a meter reading, and she directs him around the back. But then we see her younger sister Jen arrive because Jen is going to be looking after Violet's son, Toby, at home while Violet goes on her date, which she is very excited for, very nervous about. She clearly doesn't know what she wants to wear, and Jen tries to help her out a little bit, eventually picking out this very stunning red jumpsuit. Violet then arrives at a very fancy high-rise restaurant called Palette, ready for her date with photographer Henry Campbell. And she has been talking to Henry for a number of months via a dating app, and the night has finally arrived for them to meet. And as she's waiting for Henry to arrive, she's at the bar, she's getting herself a drink so she can steady her nerves. She meets bartender Cara, pianist Phil, and a fellow diner called Richard, who is also there on a date, but he's there on a blind date. And then another gentleman that she meets is Connor, who she bumps into on arrival and drops her phone. As she's sat at the bar, she gets a form of an airdrop. It's called a digi-drop, same thing. And it comes from an unknown user, and they are sending memes to her. She thinks nothing of it. She doesn't really accept them or respond to them. And at this point, Henry arrives, and they are seated at their table and served by a new waiter, Matt, who turns out to be our comedic relief. He doesn't really want to leave the two on their date to enjoy themselves. He kind of wants to insert himself into that situation. And as a result, the date is a bit bumpy, but there are some very sweet moments as well. So one of the things that Henry does is he gifts Violet a hockey puck, which is for her son to have. So there's potential there on this date, and you can tell that the two are clearly very into each other. But in the meantime, Violet is receiving more of these digi-drops, and they are becoming slightly more menacing.
Somebody sent me this.
It's just dumb kids trying to mess with you.
So she reveals this to Henry because she's looking at her phone all of the time, and Henry attempts to help find out who is sending these, theorizing that it's someone who must be seated in their section of the restaurant because you have to be sat within a certain amount of meters to send a digi-drop. He unfortunately doesn't come up with anything, and despite Violet's attempts to ignore these drops, they continue to escalate, eventually culminating in the user asking Violet to check her security system. She does this, and on the cameras, Violet witnesses a masked gunman beating Jen unconscious and locking her son Toby in his room. She is then messaged via Digidrop by her tormentor, demanding that she doesn't alert anyone and she doesn't try to leave, otherwise Toby will be killed. She then realizes that the restaurant is bugged, so there are cameras and microphones, and she is being watched via the security cameras, so her every move, anything that she says, is being observed by this user who is sending her these drops. What they do next is instruct Violet to retrieve a camera from Henry's bag because he's a photographer, and to remove the SD card from the camera. She obeys this order, and as she's removing the SD card, she flicks through the photos and discovers that Henry, who works for the city mayor, has photographed evidence of embezzlement. Henry at this point has grown pretty suspicious of Violet's behaviour, and he prepares to leave because he's had enough. The date isn't going well. And he puts it down to the fact that Violet just is not ready to go on this date and she's missing her son too much. But she kisses Henry and encourages him to stay, opening up to him about the trauma from her relationship with Blake and the fact that he ended his life in front of her and her son Toby. The user compliments Violet for her technique at keeping Henry in the restaurant and instructs her to retrieve a vial of poison from the bathroom and kill Henry. Now, at this point, everyone is a suspect, and Violet is looking around the room and trying to figure out who the hell is getting her to do this, because they must be in the restaurant somewhere. She's most suspicious of Connor, the guy that she bumped into right at the start of the night, and she confronts him, but she's unable to prove that he actually did anything. She's obviously completely unwilling to kill Henry. So what she does is, using lipstick, writes on I don't know how much it is, like a $10 bill, and slips the note to Phil, the pianist, informing him of the hostage situation. He then collapses shortly after and dies from poison himself while trying to exit the building. And the user insults Violet over her failed plan and demands that she kills Henry immediately. Reluctantly, Violet orders a couple of shots for both her and Henry, and she spikes Henry's drink. But as he prepares to drink his shot, she panics and she causes a spill and a mess at the table. And when Henry leaves to go and clean up, Cara, the barmaid, checks on Violet and mentions that Richard, the guy who was on his blind date, has had a similar bad evening and has been watching Violet's table all night. And this is when things click for Violet. She visits Richard's table with the shots and sits herself down. And Richard eventually reveals himself as the person who has been tormenting Violet the whole night. He explains that Henry intends to testify against the mayor, who is Richard's boss, and that he intends to assassinate Henry and pin the murder on Violet, who many people believe was responsible for Blake's death and that he actually didn't die by suicide. At this point, Henry arrives and sees Violet sat at the table with Richard and drinks the shot in front of them. But as Richard is about to gloat to Violet, Violet reveals that she never poisoned Henry's shot, and she has actually poisoned Richard's dessert, which he has been sat eating at the table. Furious, Richard orders his henchman, who is at Violet's house, to kill Toby and Jen while he attempts to shoot Violet, but Henry pushes her out of the way and is shot himself. And in the midst of all this, a fight ensues, during which Cara the barmaid is also injured. And in the scuffle, in the shooting, the restaurant window breaks and Violet and Richard fall outside, Richard plummeting to his death, but Henry manages to save Violet. He then tells her to take his car and drive home so that then she can save her sister and her son. Meanwhile, Jen has woken up after being knocked out and she fights with the henchman, and she and Toby flee upstairs. Violet arrives at the house and stabs the henchman, who overpowers her and corners her, and we get a callback to that first scene where she is crawling along the floor and the henchman is looming over her. Toby, in the meantime, has managed to retrieve the gun, and he manages to deliver it to Violet on his little remote control car, which he had used earlier in the film before Violet had gone out on her date, and Violet shoots the henchman dead. Not before he reveals himself to be the man right at the beginning who posed as the maintenance worker who knocked on the window. And then in our end scenes, we see some time later, Violet is visiting Henry and Jen in the hospital. The mayor is being exposed for his crimes and he's under investigation. And Jen hilariously sends a drop to prank Violet and Henry before the couple plan their second date. So definitely more thriller than it is horror, but I thought it was worth covering anyway. Let's dig into the cast first, and then we'll go through the writer and the director. Starting off first of all with Violet, so our widowed single mother, played by Megan Fahey, who I have seen in a couple of things. So she's in The White Lotus, she's in Your Monster. I thought she was a really likable character, actually, over everything. I think she'd be a fucking nightmare to go on a date with all of this going on, but she was very sweet. I thought she was very calculated. She clearly conveyed emotion very well. Like, she's got a lot going on. The fact that her son and her sister are both being threatened, and obviously trauma from what her ex-partner did. And I really got great chemistry from both Violet and Henry, and Henry was played by Brandon Sklenar. I've never seen him in anything before. He's very striking to look at. I can see him being in a lot more films. He almost looks like a cowboy. I feel like I need to see Brandon Sklenar in a cowboy romance or something like that. I think he'd fit quite well. But he was, again, very, very likable, not just from the chemistry that him and Violet had, but just as a human, like down to earth, almost quite passive at times, but then assertive and dominant in the right situations. Like the fact that he wants to take control of the situation and find out who is sending these drops to Violet because he wants to have a nice evening. He has also been looking forward to this date for a number of months. And then we have Richard, so our villain, and that is played by Reed Diamond, who has been in a number of different programs, kind of horror related films. He's been in How to Get Away with Murder. He was in Pearl, which I totally forgot about. He was in The Terror, fantastic TV series. And I'll come on to talk about Richard specifically because I'll tie that up in the twist and the ending. Now, the entire film was written by two people, Gillian Jacobs and Chris Roach. They are Blumhouse regulars. They have both worked on two films, which I didn't get on with, Fantasy Island and Truth or Dare. I think Fantasy Island is the stronger film out of the two of them. I didn't get on with Truth or Dare at all. But I thought their writing had certainly stepped up a level with this film compared to those previous two. Not so much the twist element, but certainly seeing the night unfold as quickly as it does, I really enjoyed, and I thought they did a great job. And they were coupled with director Christopher Landon, who has done some fantastic films previously. Freaky, Happy Death Day. He's also a writer. He's done a number of Paranormal Activity films. He was also a writer on this year's Heart Eyes. I'll not say anything on that film. And he was also tied to Scream 7 at one point. So he was going to be the director of Scream 7, but pulled out due to all of the controversy that surrounded that film. And I think he did a fantastic job of directing. It's probably the directing that I loved most about this film and the production. I love the design, the way that the messages came up on screen in huge letters, the way that a spotlight shone on the suspects as Violet is scanning the room. I think it's a really cool concept. It's like having title cards throughout the film, like the way that the text is interspersed with characters, and we even see the text reflected in mirrors, so it's almost part of the set. I think it looked great, the film, which I really appreciated. So let's talk about the reveal and the ending. First of all, I will say that I did not suspect Richard, but at the same time, I didn't suspect anyone because I don't feel like enough suspicion was cast on anyone to make it a true whodunit film. And similarly, we weren't made to like Richard enough for us to be surprised that it was him, because we only really get that one interaction at the bar when Violet arrives, and then we just kind of don't see him for the rest of the film. So when the reveal came, I was like, oh, okay. I would have liked more of a reveal or a twist. But I did like the fact, kind of the other mini twist that was in there was the fact that Violet poisoned his dessert. So I am thankful that that extra twist was thrown in there, because I don't feel the reveal of Richard as the tormentor was as grand as it probably could have been. And then if I talk about the ending, I feel like this film had two endings. So part A was the restaurant. Richard's been poisoned. This fight breaks out. He tries to shoot Violet and he shoots Henry instead. He stood in front of the window. It's got a crack in it. She remembers that she's got a hockey puck and launches it at the window and breaks it. And then we get Richard and Violet going out the window. Violet manages to cling onto the curtains, which is hanging on by a fucking thread on a plug socket. And somehow Henry, despite being shot, gathers up the strength to pull her up. Apparently the police are already arriving, which is really bloody quick and convenient. And he instructs her to head home and save her son and sister. So I feel like I was kind of ready for the film to end there at the restaurant, and I'd forgotten about Toby and Jen back at the house. And I almost wish that bit of the film didn't exist. I think this is where the film lost me a little bit, because Violet hanging out the window by the curtains was just a little bit too far-fetched and convenient for my liking. And then the police arriving when they did, again, felt a little bit too convenient. The fact that Henry has got this strength to pull her out the window, way too convenient. And then the other really convenient thing is when she does go to get Henry's car, she is home within minutes. Like, I'm talking 2 minutes, despite getting caught in traffic. And I know earlier on in the film she said, oh, I live like just a few minutes outside of the city. Like, it's one thing to live a few minutes outside of the city, but she is home within 90 seconds of this film. It just seems insanely quick considering she lives in the suburbs. It just seems way too convenient for me. I'm going to use the word convenient an awful lot. So then we have like part B of the ending, which is what takes place at home. And I loved the fact that we are ending with a very similar scene to what we started with Violet on the ground, this sinister man looming over her. Not like, I need to talk about the son. I didn't mention him through kindness when I talked about the cast, but her son is annoying as fuck. He very conveniently manages to get hold of the gun and drives it to Violet in his remote control car, and she shoots the killer, who is revealed to be the maintenance worker who we saw at the beginning. When I tell you it took me 5 or 6 days after watching this film to clock who the killer was, because right at the end of the film, he removes his mask almost in a, oh my God, it was him all along, like a Scooby-Doo moment. But I had no idea who he was. So we were sat in the film kind of going, is he related to her? Like, who is he? We had no idea. And it wasn't until actually I was preparing the notes for this episode that I went, shit, the maintenance worker, of course. So even then, like, writers have tried to include another twist right at the end, but it just didn't land for me, which I think is a massive shame, because I think if those twists, those 3 twists that I talked about, who Richard is, the fact that he's the tormentor, the fact that he is then poisoned, and then the fact that the henchman is the maintenance guy that we saw at the beginning, I think if they had been executed a little bit better, this would have been a 5 out of 5 mystery thriller for me. And unfortunately, because of those things, I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 in total, which isn't horrendous. Like, I don't think this is a bad film at all. Like I said, it looks stunning. I think it's very well acted, very well directed. I think it is just that final act, that final third of the film that really let things down for me. And I just wish it had more impact. But that being said, like, the way that I rate a film is, would I watch it again? And actually, I think I probably would want to watch Drop again, just to see if there was anything else that maybe I didn't pick up on the first time round, any hints or clues, because you often get that with a mystery, a thriller, a tale with a twist. And I would like to see Christopher Landon do more films similar to this. I think Freaky is brilliant. I think Happy Death Day is brilliant. And I think this just lends itself really nicely to his vision and his directing style. And I think it's a shame he stepped away from the Scream franchise, understandably, but I would have liked to have seen what he did with that after having seen Drop. Albeit I would hope that he would deliver a killer reveal a little bit better than they did in Drop. But certainly, like I said, this film isn't a letdown by any means. I just think it's a little bit lackluster, that ending. But do let me know what you thought of Drop. Like, was it a film that you enjoyed? Did you see Richard coming? Am I just dim? I kind of didn't suspect anyone as part of this. And let me know whether you thought the same about the ending as well. Like, I totally forgot about the fact that the kid and the sister were at home and she's got to save those as well, because I would have quite happily had it end at the restaurant. So let me know in the comments, and while you're there, please do drop a like, drop a follow and a subscription, and it would be great if you could leave a rating as well, because that really helps me get out there in the world and meet new people. It helps with the algorithm. And if you do want to chat further, you can follow me on my socials. So I am at Rate Scary on Instagram and YouTube, and I am at Scary Zara Mary on TikTok, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Make sure you tune in every Monday for a horror deep dive at the moment on Torture Horror, and I also release on YouTube every Wednesday a 10-minute roundup of all the latest horror news, so make sure you don't miss out on that either. But until then, I'll see thee with you then. I'll see thee soon.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
I'll be right back.
Game over. It's all for you!
Beware the moonlights.
An excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm your number one fan.